I don't think anyone enjoys going through them, but my breakup with Jason was worse than most. It wasn't just messy, it was a disaster. I'd finally had enough of his jealousy, his mood swings, the constant accusations. So I called it quits. At first he tried to act like he was fine. You know, the whole "we can still be friends" routine. But it didn't take long for things to get ugly. The text started small. Snide comments, angry rants, a few "I miss you" messages mixed in with his bitterness. I tried to ignore them. I even blocked his number, thinking that'd be the end of it. But it wasn't. A week later, I started getting messages from a number I didn't recognize. The first one was just a simple "Hey, miss me?" I knew it was him. It had to be. But I didn't reply. I couldn't give him the satisfaction. That night, as I was walking home from work, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "You look good in that dress. Black suits you." My blood went cold. I stopped dead in my tracks, glancing around. It was already dark out, and the street was mostly empty, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. I hadn't seen anyone following me, but that didn't matter. He had to be close. How else would he know what I was wearing? I didn't go straight home. Instead, I ducked into a crowded cafe and called a friend. We talked for a while, mostly me venting about how freaked out I was, but eventually, I made my way back to my apartment. For a few days, nothing happened. I thought maybe Jason had finally given up. But then, the texts started again. Only this time, they weren't just about what I was wearing. The next message was a photo. A picture of me sitting at a park earlier that afternoon. I hadn't noticed anyone near me. Hadn't seen anyone with a camera. But there it was. A candid shot of me, completely unaware that someone had been watching. I felt sick. How long had he been following me? How many pictures had he taken without me knowing? I called the police. They took it seriously enough, filed a report, but they didn't have much to go on. The number was untraceable, and I had no concrete proof that it was Jason, even though I knew in my gut that it was him. In desperation, I changed my phone number. I thought that would solve the problem. It didn't. A few days later, the messages started coming again, from another new number. This time, they weren't just photos. They were comments, disturbing, personal comments, about things that no one should know. Why do you keep your bedroom window open at night? Anyone could just walk in. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. But yes, I had been leaving my window open recently. It was hot, and I liked the fresh air. But how did he know? Was he watching me while I slept? The paranoia started to creep in. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge. I'd jump at the slightest noise, convinced that someone was inside. I started checking the locks on my windows and doors 3, 4, 5 times a night. But no matter what I did, the texts kept coming. "Nice new pajamas? The pink ones suit you?" I stared at my phone, heart pounding. I'd bought those pajamas just 2 days ago. I hadn't worn them in public. No one had seen me in them except me. I felt like I was losing my mind. I started avoiding my own home, staying with friends whenever I could, but that didn't stop the messages. If anything, they got worse. "Why aren't you home? I miss our little chats." It was like he knew where I was, what I was doing, no matter where I went. I couldn't escape him. Then, one night, I came home late, exhausted after crashing at a friend's place for a few days. I just wanted to shower, crawl into bed, and forget about everything for a while. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. There was a smell. A faint metallic smell like blood hanging in the air. My stomach churned. I flicked on the lights and immediately noticed the front door hadn't latched properly behind me. Had it been like that when I left? Or had someone else been in here? I didn't want to know, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I walked toward the bathroom. The smell got stronger the closer I got. My hand was shaking as I reached for the door handle, dreading what I might find inside. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. There, written on the bathroom mirror in bright red lipstick, were the words, "I'm closer than you think." I backed away. my heart racing, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just a game anymore. Jason, or whoever it was, had been inside my apartment. He had been right here, inches away from me, and I hadn't even known. I grabbed my phone, frantically dialing 911. The operator's voice was calm, but mine was shaking as I told her what had happened. The police arrived quickly this time, but as before, there was no sign of forced entry, no sign of Jason, just the message on the mirror mocking me. They searched the apartment top to bottom but didn't find anything. They told me to stay somewhere else for the night, just to be safe. I didn't argue. I packed a bag and left, my mind racing with fear and frustration. I had no idea what Jason wanted or why he was doing this, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to stop. The texts slowed down after that, but they never completely stopped. I changed my number again, got a new phone, but every now and then I still get a message. Just one. From an unknown number. It's always the same. I'm still here. I hadn't been back to my hometown in years, not since I left for college, and honestly, I didn't have any plans to return. But when the invitation for my 10-year high school reunion showed up in my inbox, something in me thought, why not? Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe I just wanted to see how everyone turned out. Either way, I booked a flight and a hotel, figuring it'd be a quick trip, just in and out. I should have known better. The reunion was being held at this old event hall downtown, a place that hadn't changed at all since we were kids. I pulled up and parked, taking a deep breath as I stared at the building. Part of me wanted to drive off, but I shook it off. It's just one night, I told myself. I'd see some old friends, maybe have a few drinks, and be on my way back to the hotel before midnight. Inside, it was exactly how I imagined. Same tacky decorations, same small-town crowd. It felt strange seeing everyone after so long, but there was a sense of comfort in it too. We all exchanged pleasantries, shared a few awkward laughs about the good old days, and caught up on life. It was nice. Until I saw her, Allison. My heart skipped a beat the second I spotted her across the room. She was standing near the bar talking to a group of people I didn't recognize. She looked almost the same as I remembered, same long brown hair, same bright smile. But something about her was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It had been so long since we last spoke. The breakup was messy, and after she moved away, I hadn't heard from her again. So what was she doing here? I thought she'd left town for good. Before I could turn and walk away, she caught my eye. A smile spread across her face as she made a beeline for me. Jake. Oh my God, I can't believe it's really you. I forced a smile and hugged her, though it felt more awkward than comforting. Allison, I didn't expect to see you here. She laughed softly, tilting her head. Why wouldn't I be? I never really left. That was news to me. We talked for a bit, and everything seemed normal at first. She was friendly, maybe too friendly, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. It was like she was too happy to see me, too eager to catch up. Every time I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, she'd pull it back to us, our relationship, our breakup, the life we could have had. It was unsettling. Eventually, I excused myself and made my way to the bar, desperate for a drink. I figured I'd chat with a few more people and make my exit, but as I tried to leave, my car wouldn't start. I fiddled with the engine for a bit, but nothing. Dead. Great. I called a tow truck, but it was late, and the guy on the phone said it'd be a couple of hours before they could send someone out. Frustrated, I walked back to the event hall and caught a ride back to my hotel with a couple of former classmates. I didn't think much of it at the time, just figured it was bad luck. But then the next morning, Allison showed up at my hotel. She was standing there in the lobby when I came down for breakfast, acting like it was some kind of coincidence. Hey, fancy seeing you here, she said, flashing that same too friendly smile. Mind if I join you? I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to get out of my life again, but I didn't want to cause a scene. So I nodded, letting her sit with me. The whole time she kept talking about how fate had brought us back together, how we were meant to reconnect. It was starting to creep me out. After breakfast, I headed back to the car to see if I could get it started again. Nothing. When the tow truck finally arrived, the mechanic told me that someone had tampered with the engine, like they didn't want me to leave. My blood ran cold. That's when I realized this wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was sabotaging me, keeping me from leaving town, and I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. For the next couple of days, every attempt I made to leave was thwarted. Every time I went to the garage to check on the car, something else was wrong with it. First it was the battery, then the tires. It was like someone was watching my every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Allison, she kept showing up. At my hotel, at the diner I stopped at for lunch, even at the gas station when I tried to pick up some supplies. She was always there, smiling, acting like everything was fine, like we were still friends. But I knew better. One night, after another failed attempt to leave, I got a knock on my hotel door. It was Allison. She had that same wide-eyed look, that same smile. "I brought you dinner," she said, holding up a plastic bag. I stepped back, shaking my head. "Allison, this needs to stop. I'm leaving tomorrow." Her smile faltered for the first time. "Why would you want to leave, Jake? Don't you see? We belong together. We always have." I didn't know what to say. There was a crazed look in her eyes, a desperation that scared the hell out of me. Before I could respond, she shoved the bag into my hands and stormed off down the hall, disappearing into the night. The next morning, I packed my things and headed straight for the nearest rental car service. I wasn't waiting around anymore. I wasn't going to let her trap me in this town any longer. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline pumping through my veins. It wasn't until I was miles out of town that I finally started to relax, convinced that I had escaped. Allison texted me a few times more after that, but I have since changed my number and haven't heard from her in over 5 years, thank God. I thought the divorce would be the end of it. After months of fighting, lawyers, and messy court battles, I was finally free of Aaron. He was brilliant, sure. He made a career out of his tech skills, but underneath it all, there was this cold, controlling side of him. When we got married, I ignored the little things. How he always had to be the one in control, how he'd track my location, for safety, or just to check in. But after the divorce, that's when it started getting really bad. At first I thought it was just bad luck. Small things, like my bank account showing withdrawals I didn't remember making. Nothing huge, just $20 here, 50 there. I figured maybe I'd forgotten about a couple of transactions or my card had gotten skimmed. But then it started happening more frequently, and the amounts grew larger. I called the bank, and they insisted I'd authorize the withdrawals. There were even logs of them being made from my phone, except it wasn't me. I started getting more vigilant, changing my passwords, setting up two-factor authentication, everything they tell you to do when your account's been compromised. But nothing worked. The withdrawals kept happening. Then my social media account started acting weird. I'd log in and find messages I'd supposedly sent to people. Stuff I would never say. Random insults, inappropriate comments, things that made no sense at all. I'd get confused replies from friends, some angry, some just baffled. The worst part was the posts. It wasn't just me sending weird DMs. No, my accounts were posting bizarre, personal things for all to see. It was like someone had crawled inside my head and twisted everything I'd ever shared online. By the time my work emails started sending inappropriate messages to my boss, I knew something was seriously wrong. I remember that morning so clearly. I opened my laptop ready to start another day of work from home, and there it was, an email I had supposedly sent in the middle of the night, filled with the most inappropriate, unprofessional garbage you could imagine. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw it. I called my boss immediately, trying to explain. She was confused, but thankfully, she believed me. Still, it didn't stop the panic building inside me. Someone was out to ruin my life, and it was working. That's when it hit me. Aaron. I hadn't spoken to him since the divorce, but I knew what he was capable of. He worked in cybersecurity, for God's sake. If anyone had the skills to hack into my accounts and systematically destroy my life, it was him. But I didn't want to believe it. Even for someone as twisted as Aaron, this seemed too far, right? But it kept getting worse. Every time I thought I'd gotten control back, changed my passwords, or set up new security measures, something else would go wrong. My phone would lock me out, my email passwords would reset themselves, and my calendar would suddenly fill up with random appointments I hadn't made. It felt like my entire life was slipping out of my hands. And the worst part? No matter what I did, I couldn't stop it. I was powerless. I finally confronted him. I had to know if he was behind it. I called him, heart pounding, hands shaking, and asked him point blank if he was doing this. He laughed. Not a normal laugh either. It was this cold, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "You always thought you were so smart, didn't you, Jenna?" he said, his voice oozing arrogance. "Thought you could just walk away like it was nothing." My blood ran cold. "What are you doing to me, Aaron?" He didn't deny it. In fact, he seemed to relish in it. "You'll never really leave me," he said. "Not when I can reach out and take control whenever I want." I hung up, heart racing. That's when I realized this wasn't just some petty attempt to ruin my reputation. Aaron wasn't just trying to humiliate me, he was erasing me. Piece by piece, my life was being taken apart. He was deleting old files from my computer, changing my passwords to accounts I didn't even remember having, and scrambling every bit of my online existence. I had no access to my bank, my social media, or even my email. Every digital trace of me was disappearing. I tried everything, calling tech support, hiring specialists, even going to the police, but what could they do? It was all digital, and Aaron was a ghost, covering his tracks at every turn. The specialists tried to lock him out, but every time they made progress, he'd find a way back in. It was like playing a game of chess, except I was a few moves behind, and he was always 2 steps ahead. I became paranoid. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap. Every time I checked my accounts, I was terrified of what I'd find, or worse, what I wouldn't find. My savings were gone. He wiped out my investments. Even my health insurance had been mysteriously canceled. I couldn't work. I couldn't function. It was like living in a nightmare, constantly looking over my shoulder, knowing that at any moment Aaron could reach into my life and destroy something else. Eventually, I had no choice but to go completely offline. I changed my number, deleted my email, and moved all my banking to a physical branch. I lost my job, my friends, everything. I became a ghost just like Aaron wanted. And I think that's what scared me the most. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to erase me from existence, to make sure I was nothing without him. To this day, I still don't know what he's planning next. Sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of a message, a notification that disappears before I can open it. Sometimes my phone will buzz at 3 a.m., but when I check, there's nothing there. I moved to a new city to get away from her. After the breakup with Rachel, things had spiraled out of control. I couldn't deal with the constant texts, the calls at all hours, the unannounced visits to my apartment. It was like she couldn't accept that it was over. She'd show up at my work, waiting outside my building with tears in her eyes, begging me to reconsider. Then, there were the times she wasn't crying, when her eyes would go cold, and she'd accuse me of ruining her life like I was the one who had destroyed everything. I couldn't take it anymore. So I moved. New city, new place, no contact. At first it was peaceful. I finally felt like I could breathe again. I'd gotten a quiet little house on a sleepy street with no drama, no memories of Rachel. It was perfect. Then, about 3 weeks after I'd settled in, I noticed the new neighbor. She moved in across the street, a few houses down. From my window, I could see her hauling boxes into her house, dark hair, slim build. At first, I didn't think much of it. People move in and out all the time, right? but every time I glanced over, there was something familiar about her. The way she moved, the shape of her figure, it tugged at something in the back of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. Not everyone who moves into a house down the street is out to get you, man. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling. A week or so passed and I didn't see her much. The blinds on her windows were always drawn, and I never saw anyone come or go. I chalked it up to her being a private person. Besides, I was just glad to be rid of Rachel and all the chaos that came with her. But then, one night, everything changed. It was a Wednesday, sometime after midnight. I'd been sitting on the couch, watching some mindless TV when I heard it. A rustling sound outside, like something moving in the yard. At first I ignored it. Probably just the wind, I thought. But it kept going. Soft, steady, almost rhythmic. I got up and went to the window, squinting through the darkness to see if I could make anything out. That's when I saw a shadowy figure near the side of my house, crouched low, like they were hiding. My heart skipped a beat. Grabbing my phone and a flashlight, I headed out the back door, telling myself it was probably just an animal or maybe a stray cat. But the second I stepped into the yard, I could feel something was off. The air felt heavy, thick with tension, like I wasn't alone. I followed the noise around the side of the house, keeping my flashlight low, not wanting to startle whoever, or whatever, was out there. The rustling stopped as I got closer, and for a moment everything was silent. That's when I saw it. There, right at the edge of the yard, was a small altar, if you could even call it that. It was more like a makeshift shrine. Candles flickered around the base, casting eerie shadows on the ground. But that wasn't what made my stomach turn. No, it was what was on the altar. Photos, dozens of them. All of me. Pictures from different angles, taken when I wasn't looking, while I was walking to my car, mowing the lawn, sitting on my porch. But that wasn't the worst part. Mixed in with the photos were small locks of my hair. My goddamn hair. I couldn't move. I just stood there staring at the bizarre display, my mind racing. Who the hell would do this? How had they gotten so close without me noticing? And then it hit me. The new neighbor. My legs felt like jelly as I backed away, my eyes darting around the yard, half expecting her to jump out from the shadows at any second. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my phone, dialing 911, but my mind was already racing ahead. It couldn't be. Could it? Rachel. I hadn't heard from her since I moved. Hadn't even thought about her in weeks. But now, looking at this shrine, the hair, the photos, it was all too familiar. The obsessive behavior, the stalking, it had her fingerprints all over it. The police came quickly, but by the time they arrived, the candles had burned out, and the altar was nothing more than a few scattered remnants in the dark. They took a report, searched the area, but there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence, nothing that pointed to who had been creeping around my house that night. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. The next day, I kept a closer eye on my new neighbor. I hadn't seen her leave her house once since I first noticed her move in, but now, I could feel her presence, lurking behind those drawn blinds, watching me. That evening, I was sitting on my porch when I saw movement from her house. The blinds shifted slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of her face. My stomach twisted. It was her. Rachel. She hadn't moved away. She hadn't disappeared. She'd followed me. All this time, she'd been waiting, watching, pretending to be someone else while she bided her time. I tried to play it cool, tried to act like I hadn't noticed her, but inside, I was spiraling. How had she found me? How long had she been planning this? I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, but I was too scared. What if she wasn't alone? What if she had help? The police couldn't do much without proof, so I was on my own. The next night I stayed up late, keeping my lights on, hoping to catch her in the act. But nothing happened. Days passed and still no sign of her. It was like she'd vanished again, but I knew she hadn't. I could feel her eyes on me, always watching, always waiting. I started to lose sleep. Every little noise outside made me jump. I stopped going out at night. I became paranoid, constantly checking the windows, double-checking the locks. I couldn't relax. Not while she was out there. And then one morning I woke up to find a single photo tucked under my front door. It was a picture of me, taken from my bedroom window while I slept. I packed my bags and left that afternoon. I don't know where she is now or if she's still watching me, but one thing's for sure, I'll never feel safe again. I thought I was finally free of him. After months of manipulation, mind games, and walking on eggshells, I'd cut ties with Matt for good. I changed my number, blocked him on everything, and moved on. At least, that's what I told myself. A few months after the breakup, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through social media, when I got a notification, friend request from John Doe. No profile picture, no posts, nothing. Just a blank account. Normally, I wouldn't even think twice about ignoring it, but something about it just felt off. I don't know why, but I clicked on the profile, expecting to find at least some mutual connections or photos. There was nothing. No friends, no pictures, not even a bio. I figured it was just a random bot and dismissed it. People get weird friend requests all the time, right? But then the profile started interacting with me. I'd already blocked him on everything, so it seemed impossible, but who else could it be? I started paying closer attention to the account, looking for clues. The next day when John Doe liked my latest post, I checked the timestamp. The like had come in almost immediately after I posted it. That's when I noticed something else. The account had started tagging me in real time. Wherever I went, whether it was the grocery store, the gym, or even my favorite coffee spot, John Doe would tag me there. But the thing is, I never saw anyone around me. I started getting paranoid, constantly checking over my shoulder, wondering if Matt was nearby, watching me. Then one night, everything clicked. I was out with friends, trying to forget about the whole thing when my phone buzzed. Another tag. This time, it was at the very restaurant I was sitting in. My heart started racing as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of him. There were a few couples, some groups of friends, but no one stood out. That's when I looked outside and saw someone standing across the street under the glow of a street lamp. It was Matt. My stomach dropped. He hadn't seen me yet, but there he was, lurking just close enough to watch, but far enough to stay hidden. I quickly told my friends I needed to leave and bolted for the back exit. I couldn't let him know I'd spotted him. Not yet. For the next few days, I didn't post anything. I went completely dark online, hoping to throw him off. But it didn't stop. The friend requests kept coming. New accounts, different names, but always the same pattern. The same blank profiles, the same creepy tags. He was relentless. I contacted the police, but there wasn't much they could do. Stalking cases are hard to prove, especially when everything happens online. I changed all my passwords, made my profiles private, even got a new phone. But no matter what I did, he always seemed to find a way back in. Then came the final straw. One night, I was sitting on my couch, trying to relax, when my phone buzzed again. Another tag. But this time, it wasn't a location. It was a picture. A picture of my house, taken from the street, at night. That's when I realized he wasn't just online. He was here, watching me. I didn't sleep that night. I called my friend Sarah and told her everything. She came over and we stayed up together watching the windows, waiting for any sign of movement. I felt like I was losing my mind. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. I knew it wouldn't stop him completely, but at least it was something. I moved out of my house a week later, breaking the lease and relocating to a different city. I couldn't stay there, not with him lurking around every corner. It's been a few months now, and I've finally started to feel safe again. I've changed all my information, gone off social media completely, and kept my new address a secret from everyone except my closest friends. But even now, sometimes, late at night, I'll get a notification, a friend request from a blank profile. And every time I can't help but wonder, is it him?